I'm trying to answer some honest questions that we just didn't have time to answer out loud during our Ask Me Anything sermon series. So somebody just asked the question, why does God harden hearts? They put that in quotes. And there are several references to this in the scriptures about Pharaoh, about some of the Pharisees, even about Saul, King Saul, and other places in the Bible. Why does God harden hearts if he knows, God knows that it will hurt his people by doing this? And I have a great answer for you. But then they added this statement in there, and I'm just going to be honest, your statement makes me a little bit frustrated. It also makes me a little bit angry because your statement said, by answering the question with to bring himself glory or to glorify God is not an intellectually satisfying answer. Listen, I don't know who wrote this question, but I do know that if you are not intellectually satisfied with God glorifying himself, you have a problem with every single verse of the Bible. Not this verse, with every verse of the Bible. Because there are literally no actions that a perfect creator God of the universe does that would not bring honor to himself. No good actions that God does that does not bring glory and honor and fame to himself, and also no answer or no actions that you and I may consider difficult to understand or even more difficult to accept. The actual answer to your question is he does it to bring himself glory. But you've already said that's not an acceptable answer to you. And now I'm going to try to give you a little bit more context to this answer, since that's not intellectually satisfying for you. God acts at one point in history so that the events will lead to another point in history, because at that point in history, he receives the most glory for it. Why does God put a tree in the Garden of Eden where Adam and Eve can possibly sin? Notice they don't have to, but they can possibly sin. Because when they sin, and God already knows that they will before he even creates them and puts a tree in the garden, that sin will eventually lead to the death of his son, which will lead to the greatest act of God's glory ever demonstrated in the entire creation of the universe. Why did God do that? Well, he did it so that it would eventually lead to the cross, the empty tomb, and the exaltation of his son, Jesus Christ. Why does God do any actions? Well, he does it for his own glory. But I should remind you that your own intellect, your own finite mind would never be able to understand, nor will my finite mind ever be able to understand the infinite will, the infinite purposes, the infinitely perfect plan of God. So if you're intellectually not satisfied with that answer, I want you to go back and examine your heart for just a second, because your question with your statement that goes along with it almost sounds like you are standing in judgment over the God of the universe and saying he has no right to do what he's doing. Maybe that's not what you mean, but that's what the question sounds like to me when you give a disclaimer that says, I won't accept an answer of he does it for his own glory. Our God is a consuming fire, according to James, and everything that he does is so that the world would blaze with his glory. Not that instant, maybe that act by hardening Pharaoh's heart will ultimately lead to the act of deliverance, which will lead to the Red Sea parting and will lead to the glory of God physically manifested in a pillar of fire during the day and a pillar of smoke during the day and a pillar of fire at night. It's impossible for you and I to ever know conclusively why God does anything. But I do know this, there are no actions that God does good or difficult for us to understand that are not ultimately for his own glory. You asked an honest question, and you even gave me a criteria to answer this question with. But this is my honest answer. Thanks.